Welcome to Knack's Corner. Today we're going to have a little discussion on The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. And today I have a friend with me, KFox, who's been a part of my Discord. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I am KFox from the channel KFox because I'm really creative. And I recently reread The Hobbit and then read through Lord of the Rings. And yeah, so
Was this your first time going through The Lord of the Rings?
um I read through the Fellowship a few years ago for the first time. Um I didn't like it. So
It's
I
totally understandable.
yeah. Um So this time I did a little
Persevered.
bit of I did a weird thing where I read the Silmarillion and then I read The Hobbit and then I read The Lord of the Rings because I could just tell that there was a lot I didn't know and that bothered me, and I think that made my experience personally a lot better.
Yeah, Tolkien had so many notes after he had written this that he was able to create the Silmarillion and the Unfinished Tales
Hmm.
because there was just so much information he had put into the lore and the background. Because he originally wrote these stories on trying to create language. He was creating his Elvish language and stuff like that, and he knew that along with language you need to have history and you need to
Hmm.
have like where this stuff is coming from. And
Hmm.
so he, in making the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, he also created the Silmarillion by creating all that history for his stories.
Yeah.
Um, so I think we're going to start with the Hobbit in general because
Hmm.
it's the unofficial first book of the Lord of the Rings.
Hmm.
It's where our protagonist Bilbo Baggins ends up finding the ring. What did you think of The Hobbit? Did you enjoy it more than Lord of the Rings, or both the
Um,
same? Or
well, The Hobbit is actually one that I have read through several times. It was one of the first books that I read as a child. And so it had a little bit of a nostalgia factor for me.
yeah,
Uh, so it's mixed. It has extra points for nostalgia. I feel like if I were to approach it as an adult without the nostalgia lens, my answer would be no. That I probably wouldn't have enjoyed it more than Lord of the Rings. But since I do have so much nostalgia towards it,
you have those feelings and that
yes,
love for
I
it.
just
Yeah.
love it so much. And
Well,
eh,
it's one of those books. It's also very well contained and fast paced
mhm, yes.
compared to the Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings is
Hmm.
like he was adding stuff into like, oh, I want to
Yes.
give you this vivid imagery of this. For the Hobbits,
Hmm.
like we're going on an adventure and here we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
I found the Hobbit to even be so fast paced that they did
Yeah.
not touch upon every character that they could have in
No.
the story. Most
Yeah.
of uh, so for everyone who's watching, we already sat down and recorded this for an entire hour, and let's just say the recording
Yeah.
didn't record well. So one of the
Yeah.
things that we touched upon last time was about the dwarves and
Hmm.
how they really got the short end of the stick. They were
Yes.
um, left out mostly. They did
Yeah.
not have much character. There were 13 of them.
Yeah. It was basically like just this glob of dwarves, just kind of like just this unit
Yeah,
of dwarves almost. It was just
I'm
kind
pretty
of
sure it was
always.
like Billy, Killy, Balin, and Thorn were like the four that we got to know, and
Hmm.
the rest were just
Yeah,
there.
just this blob of dwarves. Like they could have literally been like a an ooze with dwarves in it, and we wouldn't have known the difference.
Yeah,
But yeah.
and that kind of made me sad.
Hmm. Yeah.
However, at the same time, think how large the Hobbit would have been
I
if
know.
they gave us
Yeah. Yeah.
little
Like I have
bits
my
of
copy
everything.
right here, and nice, concise, and
Yeah,
yeah.
there's not a lot of filler.
Mm-mm.
Everything in there is like this is happening, this is happening. Let's move along.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so we get to Bilbo meeting Gandalf. Well, not meeting Gandalf, seeing Gandalf, because he hasn't seen Gandalf since he's been a child at this
Mm-hmm.
point in time. And Gandalf brings forth all the dwarves to his humble hobbit hole
Yes.
to eat all of his food because Gandalf knows he's going away and his food's
Yes.
not going to be any more good to him.
Yes, that's true.
And they have their little party, unexpected
Mm-hmm.
party, I guess. What did you think of that with all of them
I
showing up?
I love the chaos of that scene.
It's so uncomfortable, isn't it?
It is. It's so uncomfortable and it's so chaotic, and I love how well set up it is because the very beginning, Tolkien does such a good job at making it clear that hobbit holes are so neat and tidy and that Bilbo is a neat and tidy hobbit
And that
and
he doesn't like to be interrupted.
exactly.
So
And
to have 13 people show up at your door
mhm,
would
and
drive you nuts. Could you
oh
imagine a
yeah.
party just shows up at your
Oh
door?
no. Oh no.
Here, like I would have a panic attack.
I would too. I
Actually,
would too. That chaos. Oh my gosh.
have you ever seen the movie Mother?
I have not.
Okay, so Mother is essentially a horror film based
Hmm.
on that premise that people just start inviting themselves inside your house, and it just and like you don't have any control over it.
Hmm.
And so like I when I read The Hobbit and I seen that movie, I was like, man, this is like this feels just like this because it's like you have
Yeah.
13 rowdy dwarves showing up. Dwarves love
Hmm.
to eat every bit as much as hobbits do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're coming. You don't even understand. He didn't understand that he's going on an adventure at this point. He just knows
Hmm.
they're coming. They're showing
Yeah.
up inside of his house. They're eating his food. Like my hair would
Yeah.
be
It's just
pulled out if he ever did this.
overwhelming.
Yeah,
And then they're like singing songs about like breaking dishes and stuff. And
yeah.
he's like, don't break
Want
my
the
dishes,
knife
please.
and the forks.
Yeah. Like, like that. Yeah. It does. It almost does just feel horror-esque almost. Just
Yeah.
how like chaotic and
And can I just add that I feel like Tolkien is an excellent horror author.
hmm and it does have also I feel like elements of absurdism, and that might be why
Oh, certainly.
I like a
In
lot
this
of
world,
scenes. Yep,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
I didn't realize how much I loved absurdism until somebody put a label on it for me, and I was like, yeah, everything that I love about every book that I love is absurdism.
How like just strange it is, and like
Yeah.
how like something that's happening would never really happen, and
Exactly.
things
Like
like
I
that.
love bizarre
Yeah,
scenarios like that.
yeah,
And but yeah, so that is probably one of my favorite scenes in the entire book. Just because it's just so overwhelming and yeah, bizarre. Just
yeah. And then,
uh
of course, after much discussion and
mhm,
contemplation, Bilbo decides to go on his adventure with
mhm,
Gandalf and the dwarves, and they set
mhm.
out. And it is the first part the trolls? Is that like the first big part of the
That is, let me check.
journey?
I
Because
think.
or something else happened before that. 'Cause I think basically they just start leaving, and then one of the first few places they stop at overnight is this burnt down barn or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. I think the trolls are the first. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like we get to
First
experience
little town.
the trolls wanting to
Mhm.
squish them into jelly and eat them all, right?
Yep. Yep.
And I love the whole entire situation. Even in the movie, I thought that was fantastic when he's like,
Mm-hmm.
"Don't eat them; they're full of worms, nasty things, dirty,
Ah,
nasty things. Dwarves are."
hmm. Yes. And as a child I really enjoyed the cleverness of Gandalf in that situation where he just started like, yelling from behind rocks like yeah, like I don't know. I
Yeah.
loved that.
It it was so much fun. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because you felt the danger, but then all of a
Yeah.
sudden it was like, okay, the danger's passing right now, and you get to
Mm-hmm.
enjoy a little bit of what's happening.
Yeah, and it just became silly and funny
Yeah,
and and I guess a lot of, especially at that time, I feel like modern fantasy is coming back around to cleverness being a solution, but especially in the 90s and early 2000s, it was a lot of, oh, you walk in and you just stab people and you kill the bad
yeah,
guy and that's
yeah.
how
A
you
lot of
win.
sword fighting, right?
Exactly.
But
And
now
that's,
the
yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah,
mean the
but finding like cleverness as the key to
yeah,
winning, I really enjoyed that as a child because while, I enjoyed sports, I was never
yeah.
violent.
I'm not a sports going folk myself. So,
Mhm.
like, I never got into sports a whole lot. I was always
Mhm.
more into like playing chess or reading books or
Yeah.
going on long walks in the woods.
Mhm.
Those kinds of things were what I used to do when I was a kid. I used to dress up like the hobbits and go right around the woods and stuff. Right? It
Yep.
was so much fun, and
Mhm.
this book like ignited an imagination that I never had before any of that, or
Mhm.
didn't seemingly seem to come to the forefront of my mind.
Mhm.
Like, this story made me want to live it, and I can
Yeah.
remember after the movies coming out when I was a kid growing up, I always wanted to be like I wanted to play the role of Bard in the movie.
Yeah.
They ever made the Hobbit films. I was like,
Mhm.
that'd be so much fun to be Bard. Like,
Yep.
because
Yep.
they even let's not get ahead of ourselves. I guess we'll talk about Bard later on.
Yes.
Um, so after the whole troll thing, we get to see
Mhm.
the cool swords get found: Orcrest,
Yes.
Stan, Glamdring, and Sting.
Mhm.
Um, and I really love get when they get those swords because it's one of the main tropes in fantasy I always love is the magical sword that you get.
Mhm.
And Tolkien is a huge fan of that. Like from the whole, I was it Excalibur that started that, like
Um,
King Arthur, like getting the
I
magical sword to
in
rule.
Western fantasy, Excalibur
Probably,
is probably it,
yeah,
but I don't want to say that it's the beginning because
yeah. There's all
there
kinds
are
of
ones and well, and even further back, I'm thinking that one of my favorite fairy tales is called like the Iron Ring, where it talks about a ring that has wishes, and so like the
oh
magical
yes,
item
yeah,
idea has been
yeah,
around for a very long time. Specifically a
yeah,
sword, I don't
yeah.
know.
So like, and Tolkien loves using the whole magic swords
Mhm.
because
Yes.
he gives them to these three characters here, but
Mhm.
he also gives it to Aragorn in Lord of the Rings with
Mhm.
Anduril, right? So
Mhm.
that's one of the things I always loved because I used to pick up sticks in the woods and pretend they were swords. And then when I had
Mhm.
money, I bought swords. I had Glamdring at one point in time,
Oh, wow.
and I sold it off when I was younger. But it was a sword I had, and I loved it.
Mhm.
It had all the elf runes and everything
Yeah.
in it, and it was
Yeah. That's
fantastic.
so cool.
Um, so out of the three, Orcrest, Glamdring, and Sting, which one was your favorite sword?
Um, I think I liked Sting just because I liked the idea of it being bestowed to such a humble person.
Yes,
And
and I love that it's described as nothing more than a letter opener.
exactly, exactly. And over again, people almost mock it by calling it things like, "Oh, that's not a sword, that's a letter opener. Oh, that's barely
That's a
even a
knife.
dagger." But
Yeah,
again, it is, it is used to defeat evil still. Like, and
yeah,
these hobbits are and use it to sort of prove these people wrong. And I don't know. I think that is okay, this is going to sound a little bit silly, but I guess I've always thought of it as a little bit of like the underdog sword.
yeah,
And that's just kind of my thing. I love things like that where it seems so small and insignificant and is, does great things still, if that makes sense.
Most certainly. I think there's even a part where Bilbo wants to ask Lord Elrond about Sting, and he ends up not asking about it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And because someone tells him, like,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have
Yeah.
done any great deeds or anything to be named.
Exactly.
But I beg to differ, though, because like it glows blue. It's it's one of the, it's a Gondolin where those swords were made.
I
So
think so.
it's one of the swords from Gondolin.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that kind of says that the sword has a little bit more history to it than what's being let on.
Mm-hmm.
I would have been interested to see it. Now, would you say it's fair to say that Sting, the sword, has more character development in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings than some characters have in modern fantasy today?
I mean, yeah, because there are definitely some characters that are.
Well, I mean, it goes on a journey. It tells a whole
Yeah,
story. It gets
yeah.
named Sting from its deeds and stuff like that. And then it goes on the greatest journey of all time in the next trilogy.
I
It
mean,
still gets
I
to go
mean,
on.
there's nothing to say that magical swords can't have character development in my
But
opinion.
well, it's sort of like the way Stephen
Hmm.
King writes about like Derry, Maine, or Shawshank Redemption. Those
Hmm.
places, or even the Overlook Hotel in
Hmm.
The Shining. Those places have
Hmm.
character to them. They
Hmm.
have, they're almost a character in themselves when you
Yeah.
read about them.
Well,
So
yeah,
inanimate objects can still have that, and
absolutely.
I think Sting is a fantastic example of that,
Hmm.
because the sword itself has, it goes on a journey. It gets its own name, like Bilbo
Hmm.
names it.
Hmm.
It shows the deeds it goes through, and even in Lord of the Rings, Frodo goes, "This is Sting. You have
Yeah.
seen it before, haven't you?" Like,
Yeah.
introduces it as if
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
person, and you know we see Sam pick it up, and we see the story continue
Hmm.
on with it. And we see,
Yeah.
all the deeds it goes through.
Yeah.
It has character development.
Yeah, and it does carry so much of, I guess, the weight of the narrative, so to speak, because even though you like the missions involved are, different between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, it does seem like whoever's carrying Sting is the one who is trying to carry on the missions. And so
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's every bit as much as the One Ring, and the One Ring
Mhm.
has is the story
Mhm. Yeah.
in the Lord of the Rings, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I found that to be quite interesting. So one of my favorite things that Tolkien does in his writing is banquets.
Mhm.
I love when he has groups of people sitting down feasting.
Mhm.
How did you feel about the dwarves in Rivendell feasting around a table with Elrond?
Um, I well, yes, also I always enjoy these, and I just really, this was probably the only scene where the dwarves really got any justice, I guess. Like a lot of the time I was like, why are there even 13 dwarves here? Like
Like, we could have
why.
had 5 or 6 or 7
Exactly,
dwarves, right?
exactly. And this was one of the well, this is one of the only scenes that I was like, okay, this is
Yeah, they're having
this is
fun. They're safe.
legitimate. Like this
They're
is fun. This
yeah,
is I'm glad that there are 13 dwarves here. It was the beginning scene and this scene and both were eating scenes. So,
yeah.
but
Well,
yeah.
Tolkien always does fantastic eating scenes.
Yeah, and
It's
it's very cozy and wholesome and yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then of course, so we get to learn the history of the swords through this
Mhm.
banquet, and yeah, they've what else happens there? I think this is where Bilbo and Elrond becomes really good friends with
Mm-hmm.
each other, and I think Elrond even offers Bilbo to stay, doesn't he?
I think so.
Like, or offers him to come back
Yeah,
anytime
yeah, to
or
come
anything like
back.
that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's yeah,
yeah. And
yeah.
so our hobbits and dwarves leave Rivendell,
Mm-hmm.
and they start to head out, and they come across, was it rock giants or the goblins first?
I think it was the goblins
Giant
first, but I could be.
goblins, yeah. So they end up going to the goblins.
The Rock Giants was so brief that I barely even remember that.
Yeah, it was only mentioned in passing, I think,
Yeah.
when they were going through the mountain pass.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to see them in Goblin Town.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
I think there's a difference between the book and the movie. Bilbo is with the dwarves for most of the book in Goblin Town.
Mm-hmm.
Gets separated at the end, where in
Yeah.
the movie he separates at the beginning
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
Bilbo's
because he
with them for quite a
mhm.
bit of it, I think.
Yeah, yeah, he separates. I want to say whenever, let's see.
Gandalf shows up.
Yeah, like whenever Gandalf shows up, like there's
Yeah,
like everybody flees out and he like hits his head or something like that.
yeah, and then
Someone
he's
drops
like
him.
down and he
Yeah.
finds the ring and comes across
Mm-hmm.
Gollum and does my favorite part of the book,
The riddles in the dark.
Riddles in the
Yep.
Dark. That
Yep.
is my favorite,
Yep.
and I just I'm a fan of riddles, so sitting
Mm-hmm.
there and listening to them was a lot of fun, and
Mm-hmm.
Gollum was such a very interesting character when we first meet him because he's kind of
Mm-hmm.
skulky.
Yeah.
He's like in the dark, in the water. He
Mm-hmm.
does a lot of fishing and stuff, and
Yeah.
I think it's also mentioned that he stinks, like he smells.
Yeah. I think it says
Uh,
something like he smells like rotting fish or something like
yeah, it
that.
smells.
Yeah.
I think putrid was the word, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and
Mhm.
so it was very interesting to get to meet him. And then Bilbo, of course, decides he's going to pull out the ring and start using
Mhm.
the magical ability, which he didn't know it
Mhm. Which
had yet.
yeah, he didn't even know. He was just like, "Oh, there's something in my pocket. What's going on here?"
Yeah, what's in my pocket?
Mhm.
um, and so Bilbo ends up following Gollum out of the
Mhm.
cave
Mhm.
and ends up getting out and running into Gandalf and the dwarves. Now, did
Mhm.
you ever see the old cartoon of The Hobbit?
A long, long time ago.
Me and my daughters watch it quite a bit,
Okay.
um, and I love how Gandalf's like, that has a ring to it, Bilbo. That has a ring of truth to it. It's very. And he just goes on like keeps making puns about magic and things, and I just die laughing whenever I watch it. And I love it.
That's so
Um,
good.
so in the books, we have warg riders show up at this point, kind of
Mhm.
chase them up a tree. In the
Mhm.
movie, we have the white orc show up.
Mhm.
Now, what was your feeling on them adding the white orc into the film compared to the books?
I think I would have liked it better if the effects had been better.
If they were makeup,
Yeah.
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 Um, there, so I'm going to touch on the Hobbit films for a second here.
Okay.
A lot of people are very disappointed in the Hobbit films, and I can totally understand why.
Mhm.
The films were rushed because essentially what happened was we had Guillermo del Toro, who was supposed to be lined up to direct,
Mhm.
and ended up going in a direction the studio didn't like. And
Mhm.
so they were like, okay, you're fired, and Peter Jackson, you're doing the job. Well, Peter Jackson spent like 3 to 4 years making miniatures, getting
Mhm.
makeup designs, getting artwork done, costume designs, props,
Mhm.
everything, set location setup, everything. He spent 4 years doing that for Lord of the Rings before it
Mhm.
even went into production, and he's basically handed the keys to the Hobbit and going, okay, you need to have this movie ready in a year and a half's time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so he's like, I don't have the ability to do everything I did for Lord of the Rings, so
Yeah.
we're just going to CGI everything.
Yeah.
And I think that was a huge failure on the studio's part.
Absolutely.
I personally would have preferred them to go, take an extra year and a half.
Yeah.
Start getting some stuff together.
Yeah, I definitely would have
there.
rather waited.
Yeah. But they didn't, and that's fine. I don't think it's nearly as good as Lord of the Rings. It never was going to be, but it still could have been close.
Yeah.
It ended up not being close.
No.
But that's okay. To me, any time in Middle Earth is fantastic. I love Middle Earth. It's my home. I want to be there. So being able to see it on screen, hearing Howard Shore's score music, like his score music between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings wasn't very different. I really enjoyed that. So yeah, for the films, they didn't need to do 3 films. They could have done it in 2.
Easily, yeah.
Legolas being involved, I would have been okay with him being in Mirkwood and that being it. But
that was pure fan service. They were like, you liked Legolas, have more Legolas. Here's Legolas.
I like him and all, and like I said, he could fit in Mirkwood, but giving him a storyline beyond that was too much. Anyway,
I absolutely agree.
Enough about the films. That was my rant. Unless if you want to go on a rant about the films, you're welcome to.
Honestly, I saw them in theaters and I haven't seen them since, and I have a little bit of a memory issue, so I can't remember a lot of things, and so I remember like big things, like I really didn't like the CGI and I remember thinking this doesn't need to be 3 movies and things like that, but outside of that I don't remember a whole lot about the movies.
It also really showed that the dwarves did not have any personality given to them by Tolkien, even, because they didn't have anything to go on for all those extra dwarves, right?
Yeah.
And anyway, so back to story. Eagles show up, and they save their butts. I love the eagles. They're one of my favorite creatures in Middle Earth.
Yes, absolutely.
And
I love them as well.
Everyone is constantly like, well, why didn't the eagles fly them to Mordor, or blah, 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 or all the way to Erebor? And it's like, the eagles are a very, they are proud peoples.
Yeah.
They are their own special race of people, and they're intelligent. Yeah. It's not like they're just like, they're at the whim of anything. And I think the only reason why they do it in a favor to Gandalf, because I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, Gandalf saved Menware, Melware, whatever his name is, Guerre, whatever. I can't pronounce his name. I don't know.
Yeah, eagle name.
The lead eagle dude. He saves him, so the eagle is always there to help out Gandalf when he needs it. But that does not mean the eagle is there to do everything.
Whatever people want. Yeah, it's not like, oh, well, they rode horses around. Why can't they ride eagles around? There's something.
It's a favor to Gandalf.
Yeah,
period.
Exactly.
It's not to do a job.
Yeah.
So, it's not up to them. And okay, if Sauron wins, what do the eagles care? They rule in the sky. Sauron's not in the sky.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like, he might have the fell beast, but we've already seen the eagles versus fell beasts. We know that if they were to try and pick a fight, the eagles would probably win.
Yeah. Yeah. And there aren't that many fell beasts, so the eagles are just like, okay, whatever.
So you know what, they've done enough. In my mind, they've done enough. They don't need to do more. So they get them so far. Where is it? Just before, is it Bjorn's place there? We're about to go to the bear.
Yep.
Yeah. So what did you think of that? The skin changer.
I love Bjorn, and I wish we had more information about him. I He is probably the thing that I have looked up the most, like YouTube videos about, like explanations, the most like background theories and stuff, because apparently there's no actual like concrete
Information.
information on what he is or why he is. And he is, every time I read fantasy books, I'm like, okay, what would I want to be? Who would I want to be? That sort of thing. And he is definitely one of the people where I looked at him and I was like, okay, he's whatever he is.
He's an
I
animorph.
Yeah, exactly. I want to be an animorph. And
Um,
yeah.
I thought he was so cool. Like
Oh yeah.
I wanted to learn more about his people because
Mhm.
not only is he a skin changer, he's
Mhm.
also partially giant.
Yeah. Yeah,
He's a very large person.
yeah. And yeah, he's
Like,
very large. He's a skin changer. He's like this like protector of nature, and
and that's what I love about him is
yeah.
his protection of nature. Like
Mhm.
he doesn't care about the goings ons of people. He cares about,
Mhm.
you know, is this little tiny creature being taken care of? Is it protected? And that's
Mhm.
all he
Yeah.
cares about.
Yeah.
And I love that about him. And like even when he's in bear form, he knows,
Yeah.
which is interesting to me because at the
Mhm.
beginning when we first meet him, he's kind of like rampage, like
Mhm.
coming at them, right?
Yeah.
And then at the end, he's just watching over them,
Yeah.
sort of deal, right? So I thought that
Yep.
was pretty neat to see his
Mhm.
control over the beast when he changes.
Yep. Yep.
And I would love to hear more about him. Now,
Mhm.
what did you think about Mr. Radagast the Brown?
He again, he's another one that I love. Um and he I guess he is in the same vein, and I'm gonna, kind of skip ahead a little bit to a character that I love, Tom Bombadil, of
Yes.
like kind of silly characters that a lot of people like don't like because they're silly and
He's
seem,
goofy.
yeah. And
I love it. I
I
love that.
me too, I love characters that can bring a little bit of lightness, especially if they do have sort of power. Um,
Yeah.
because uh, I feel like modern fantasy is very saturated with really powerful beings that are extremely broody,
Yeah.
and
They're always
I
dark.
don't like that.
I don't mind that. I like dark characters myself,
Yeah.
but I think something that is missing from a lot of things is the
Hmm.
light characters.
Yes,
Like, did you read the Poppy War?
I did.
Okay, so you know who I'm talking about, Sheng Yong,
Hmm.
the trainer
Yes, yes.
for Ren, and
Hmm.
I found him to be very Radagasty.
Yes, he
You
very much
know,
was. Yes.
like very, he's an opium addict, where Radagast is like mushrooms and things like
Yeah,
that, and
exactly. Yeah.
he's he's kind of spacey, and he's all about
Hmm.
nature, and he's all about the order of things,
Yeah.
and I really love that Radagast is and also this is a kid's book.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot of people seem to forget that when talking about The Hobbit is
Hmm.
it's a kid's book. It's not meant to be, dark.
No.
And even though it's a kid's book, it's still very dark in a lot of sense for a lot of
Hmm.
issues.
Hmm.
But I find Tolkien does a fantastic job at adding in
Hmm.
these wonderful, colorful beings who are
Hmm.
um, very childish in ways.
Yeah, and
You know?
yeah, and it also keeps, I feel like, the narrative very balanced, because you do have characters like Thorin, where he's not the type to giggle. He's not the type
No,
to
he's very
have,
stoic.
exactly. And if every character is like that, then
It's going to be very
stories
bland.
can be
Yeah.
very one note. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I don't
And
know if you've read Joanne Abercrombie.
I have not yet.
Okay, the Blade itself is very dark, but even in its darkness, he's
Hmm.
able to write, for instance, and anyone who's ever read it, Glocta is a very dark
Hmm.
character,
Hmm.
but he has very, I don't want to say childish, but he has very funny moments within himself. It's
Hmm.
like dark humor though, so
Okay.
it's a very interesting way, and I think that he exerts it in the right way. But there are so many
Hmm.
authors out there who can't make a dark character have that sort of childish behavior to it as well
Hmm.
and make it work without it
Yeah.
being silly, right?
Yeah.
And I find, like you said, with Thorn, he's very stoic. He doesn't do a whole lot of that. And it's easy to make a dark story have a lot of serious people.
Hmm.
And I find Glocta to not be very serious in that instant.
Hmm.
So I enjoy that because I think it's Balin in the story who is
Hmm.
not very serious, but he's,
Yeah. He's also
stoic
a
in a
little
sense way.
more soft-hearted, I
Yes.
feel like, but at the same time, yeah, he's still not, yeah.
Very caring, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So, so we are going into Mirkwood now.
Yes.
The spiders.
Yes.
I love it. I
Yes.
love it.
I love
So
the
my
entire
wife,
atmosphere.
my wife Nadia is terrified of spiders, even little ones.
Hmm.
I'm a person who will leave a spider alone and let them
Yeah.
do their job and eat the
Yeah.
flies. Like
Yeah.
they have a purpose. They're very, they're not
Hmm.
coming to eat me. They're not
Yeah.
hungry for me.
Exactly.
So
Yeah. Yeah. They
I
leave me
don't
alone. I leave them alone.
right. So I don't see the fear in spiders, but
Hmm.
Tolkien, I believe it was in South Africa where his
Hmm.
family was stationed when his father was in the military.
Hmm.
Um, he was, I can't remember if he was bitten by one when he was a child
Hmm.
or if he happened to be cornered by one in his room as a
Hmm.
child, but it was a large spider. And it
Yeah.
scared him so much that
That
it
he just has
stuck with him.
this
And so
phobia. Yeah.
he created these spiders. Now, when you read the Silmarillion, you got to learn
Hmm.
about the spider that they sent to the
Yes.
void, the
Yes.
big, giant
Yes,
spider.
oh gosh, I forget her name, but yes.
Wasn't it the size of like a mountain or something like
Yes.
that?
Yes.
And it was ridiculous. And it was actually the one that gave birth to all these Mirkwood
Yes, and
spiders.
she like
And
ate
she loved.
trees and stuff.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
like, that's terrifying. I would be scared of a spider like that. That is freaky. And then we
Yeah.
get into Mirkwood, and even those spiders are terrifying. If I
Mhm.
seen a big spider or if there was a poisonous spider, I would be scared of it. I live in Nova
Yeah.
Scotia. We have zero poisonous spiders. There are none. There is no reason to be afraid of a spider in
Yeah.
Nova Scotia. Just
Yeah.
like snakes in Nova
Mhm.
Scotia, no reason to be afraid of snakes. No
Yeah.
poisonous snakes here. So, like, I've never gotten the fear of
Mhm.
those things because to me, I just go, yeah,
Yeah.
but we don't have anything deadly here, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And if it was something deadly, I'd totally get the fear. I would
Yeah.
understand it. At that point, I get it. But
Mhm.
anyway,
Or
Tolkien
or the size of
seems,
you.
yeah, right?
Yeah.
Um, Tolkien seems to be able to take his fear of spiders, even if it's little
Mhm.
ones, and he seems to make it so that everyone can understand
Yeah.
the fear of spiders. And
Yes.
that's something that I really liked about it. And it was a good perspective on it. And
Mhm.
you could tell his fear of spiders because when he starts having them like come down and like take all the dwarves and
Mhm.
stuff, and Bilbo is there having to save everyone. And this is
Yep.
actually where Bilbo decides to name his sword
Yep.
Sting. And I find this to be one of the best Bilbo moments in the entire
Mhm.
book
Yes.
because there's no Gandalf. Gandalf's not around.
Yep.
He's off dealing with the necromancer right now,
Yep.
which I'm fine that they added into the movie.
Oh yeah.
I love the whole necromancer
Yep.
storyline they did. But yeah, he's off doing that. The dwarves are all captured and being ready to be taken by the spiders. And now Bilbo is the only one left, puts on his ring, and he
Yeah.
goes off and does his duty. And this is one of the things that I truly loved about the Scouring of the Shire is the braveness of hobbits.
Yes.
Is that they don't get enough credit for that because they're known as tiny, peaceful folk who don't do adventures and all that sort of stuff. So they don't really have the opportunity to show how brave they can be. And I think they get misrepresented and misunderstood for that. And this is a moment where Bilbo doesn't even hesitate. He just puts on the ring, he grabs Sting, and he goes and he does his job. And he saves all the dwarves.
Yeah.
And not even like 2 chapters later is he saving them again from elves.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, so this goes to show the bravery of hobbits.
Yes.
And this is one of the reasons why Bilbo is my favorite hobbit of all hobbits.
Okay,
Like,
yeah.
Out of all 5 of the main hobbits that we get, Bilbo is my favorite. He's my number 1. And I've always felt that way because I find him to be the most like me that I can think of a hobbit being.
Yeah.
I love my food. I like being alone. I like to smoke my pipe weed. I like to relax. If I have to be brave, I will be brave and do what I have to. But if I don't have to do anything, I just want to be left alone and chill out.
Yeah.
So that's what I love about Bilbo. And time again, we see him put in these positions where he has to be brave. He doesn't have a choice. Like, it's either I help my friends out or I just go back home. And so he will help his friends out. And that was something I was always able to identify with. Yeah. And I found like we don't get to experience that as much in Lord of the Rings, even though the Lord of the Rings is a much larger book. In The Hobbit, we are constantly seeing the value of Bilbo and his skills and his bravery and how much he's able to do and his intelligence, right? We are constantly seeing him problem solve, being, like you said earlier, being witty.
Yeah.
Able to sit there and think up of things. And I find that to be a fantastic aspect of Bilbo.
Yeah.
And something I truly love about his character. So after the spiders, we get captured by the elves, and we're in Mirkwood now with King Thranduil. What did you think of being in Mirkwood? If you thought that if Tolkien had written this book after Lord of the Rings, do you think he would have put Legolas in Mirkwood?
I really liked how atmospheric Mirkwood was. The thing that I remember the most is, okay, so I live in the southeastern United States, and here our summers we call it muggy. It's very hot, very humid, very awful, very oppressive.
Heavy.
Some days you walk out and you feel like you are suffocating. And
I don't think we get it as heavy as you guys, but we're in Nova Scotia. We're a peninsula off of Canada, and we are in the southeastern most part of Canada, basically.
Yes.
And it is constantly muggy.
Yeah.
I totally understand about that. Now, I think you guys get more heat than we do.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine what the suffocation is like. Because the moisture in the air for what it's like being by the water is ridiculous. In the summertime, it's hard to breathe. And in the wintertime, it kills your lungs.
Oh, yeah.
And it's right to the bone, right?
Absolutely, yes.
So, sorry to interrupt.
No worries.
We've just had a moment, like a few days, where it was ridiculously muggy.
Oh, yeah. And so, like, sitting here reading about Mirkwood, like, even though I was inside in my air conditioned house, I'm sitting here reading it and I'm feeling like that oppression on my breathing. Like I'm feeling that like pressure on me when I walk outside on that hot day, like just that feeling of,
The heat, just
just,
yeah.
yeah, just like that, almost that pressure on me. And just by reading Tolkien's descriptions and stuff, and I
It's very
loved it.
claustrophobic, isn't
It
it?
is,
Yeah,
yes. And,
you could be in wide open air, and the
mhm.
mugginess will make you feel claustrophobic.
And like,
And that was what Mirkwood was.
yes. And, a few years ago, I hiked the Appalachian Trail, and I almost wonder, like, I'm sitting here reading it, and I did it. I started in Maine in June, and I ended in Georgia in October. So I went through like New York in July, um, and it's just basically like just this tunnel of trees, just, and I like reading some of the descriptions. I'm like sitting here wondering, did Tolkien ever come over here? Did he ever hike that trail? Because like in the middle of the summer,
Yeah,
because that's what this feels like to me.
he very well could have, you know. Like
uh
he was a nature guy, right? So he
yeah.
was always
Hmm.
in nature.
Yeah.
Apparently
And
people hated to go on walks with him.
I've heard, because he spent like hours looking at trees and stuff.
Yeah, he'd just stop and just
Hmm.
stare at something for like 40
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah,
I mean, it shows in his work too,
it
like the way
does.
he writes that like
Yeah.
he could describe a flower right down to the powder on the inside of the little yellow stems coming up,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Uh,
So do you think he would have added Legolas in here if Legolas was a character he had created at this point in time?
I think that I think he
Or would,
would have at least briefly mentioned him, kind of like in Lord of the Rings, how he had, oh gosh, who was it? During the river scene, um, he had the elf that took,
Glorfindale?
yeah, kind of how like how Glorfindel came, and Glorfindel is very significant in like the Silmarillion.
Yeah.
I feel like he would have had something like that maybe
Or he
happen.
just shows up for a minute and then he's
Mm-hmm.
gone. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
That's totally what I think would have happened. And I
mm-hmm.
think that's all Peter Jackson should have done with the
Yeah.
film.
Yeah, exactly.
Have
Exactly.
him
Like just
there
a,
capturing the
yep.
dwarves, bring them in their
Mm-hmm.
Mirkwood, hand them off to his father, step out of scene, done.
Yep, exactly.
Bye bye, Legolas. That was it. That's you.
Yep.
Bye. Thank you for showing up.
Yep. Yep.
And that's all I
Um
wanted.
uh
So then we get to go do some barrel riding.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love
Um,
that.
what did you
Ah.
think about Bilbo coming in and helping the dwarves escape?
Well, all of this is one of my favorite tropes, which I love the trope where just the normal person is thrown into this crazy situation and they just have to figure it out. And Bilbo just does such an excellent job at it. I love it.
He does the job.
Yes,
Like
exactly.
he
Like
takes care of it all.
exactly. And I love it so much. I love his cleverness, and I love the idea. And I actually, this is a scene in the movies that I do remember, because I remember laughing so hard throughout the entirety of it, and I remember enjoying it. Um, but yes, I loved the cleverness of the plan, and yeah, I just love Bilbo doing what he has to do and doing
Being
it
brave.
well. Yeah,
Being a brave hobbit. Like he
yeah,
shows time and time again
yeah,
that he's either A, not like other hobbits, or B, hobbits are a lot more
yeah,
impressive than people think they are.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
think it's the latter. I think they're
I
just
think
more
so. I think,
impressive than what people think
oh
they
yeah, because, and I think that with through Lord of the Rings, it kind of shows that even more so, because
are. Yeah. We get to see all four of them show their,
exactly.
and actually not even just four of them. We're not going to
No,
get there, but
yeah, yeah,
what's his name? Boggins? Baggins? No,
The farmer?
there was a fifth Hobbit who decided not to go
Oh,
with the
oh
main
goodness.
four. We'll get to it when
I
we
can
get
look
to
it up at some point, yeah.
but yeah, he's also goes and shows how brave he
Mm-hmm.
is once the hobbits come back for the scouring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we get now to let's get over to Lake Town. What did you think about meeting Bard and everything going on in Lake Town?
Um, that was very interesting. It felt very okay, and
Do
this
you
is
feel it
gonna
was
sound
rushed?
it felt rushed. It felt very I feel like a lot of video games were inspired by this specific scenario.
Yes.
Because I feel like I've played a lot of video games where they have this exact town where this is happening, where there's this, like
It's
this
a,
cranky
it's a
old
very
person. Like, yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah,
a very influential part to a
yes.
lot of fantasy, especially for like towns on the water. You
Mhm.
get a lot of that like docks
Mhm.
politics going on. You
Yep.
have the old rich man running the town
Yep.
and kind
Yep.
of like making it go under, like
Yep.
the
Yes.
Scrooge story, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's very interesting, and I
Mhm.
love the fact that they even like help out the hobbits
Oh
or the
yeah.
hobbits, not the hobbits, the
The
dwarves.
dwarves, yeah.
Yeah, that they help out the dwarves and getting them to
Mhm.
going to the mountain.
Mhm.
And I really love meeting Bard. Like to me, that was something I always enjoyed as a kid was
Mhm.
his short little storyline. I wish he had a
Yeah.
larger role to play
Mhm.
because his ascension to king was just
Mhm.
so fast paced, but
It
also
was.
once he was there, it was
Yeah.
very interesting. He seemed like an interesting character.
Yeah.
That's actually something I really enjoyed they did with the movies for his
Yeah. That they
character.
expanded on him a lot more. I
Yeah,
agree.
made him a fuller character, and
Mhm.
that was fantastic. But I feel like the entirety of The Hobbit has that. That's its largest problem is it has too many characters with not enough
Yeah.
story for them.
Yeah. The only real character that's developed is Bilbo.
Well, Bilbo, Thorn, and Gandalf. Those are about the
Yeah.
only three that you get real
Mhm.
information about. Everyone else is just
Mhm.
kind of off to the side and there.
Yeah.
So we're touching quickly on this because we're going to move on to uh, Bilbo and Smog.
Mhm.
What did you think of this?
I really that I love dragons and I love Smaug.
Me
I
too.
love the way that Tolkien writes Smaug to be this sinister and sort of
Really intelligent.
clever. Yeah,
Yeah,
I I I very much enjoy it, and I wish that that Lord of the Rings had dragons. I wish that
I know.
everything
Like,
had
where did the
dragons.
dragons go? Because I mean,
Yes.
they talk about them being in the north,
Mhm.
um, and because Smog is a fire drake from the north.
Mhm.
And like we get to Lord of the Rings, and it's this big giant epic, and you totally would have thought that like Sauron would have like
At
gathered
least
dragons or
one.
something,
At least
right?
one.
It would have been so cool. But at the same time, I have a feeling
Mhm.
that Tolkien was trying to stay away from dragons for Lord of the Rings
Mhm.
because a lot of fantasy previous to his work involved slaying dragons.
Oh, that's fair. That's
In
fair.
European for
Yeah, like
European
Beowulf
fantasy, right?
and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and you also get
Mhm.
basically Norse mythology has a
Mhm.
lot of slaying, and he's a professor of Norse
Mhm.
mythology and history and stuff, right?
Mhm.
And so he's already gone through all this. He knows about dragons. So The Hobbit was his dragon story,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And in Lord of the Rings, he gave us fell beasts, which are
Mhm.
described as like sort of dragons, but not.
Yeah.
And it was weird, but
Yeah.
I I feel like he knew dragons were used in a
Mhm.
lot of fantasy literature, and since
Mhm.
what he was creating, he probably wanted to do something on his own. Like,
Yeah.
for instance, I have been working on a fantasy book for my daughters, and I
Mhm.
decided against using dragons altogether
Mhm.
because dragons are just so widely used right now
Mhm.
in fantasy, and I was actually using a phoenix instead.
Oh, that's nice.
Now,
Yeah.
my book is nothing like the Poppy War,
Mhm.
but the Poppy War hit
Mhm.
on about five similar notes as what I was writing, to the point that I
Okay.
stopped writing my book because it was so similar in
Oh.
certain ways. And that's why I love the Poppy War so much, because it
Uh-huh.
was a story I was creating already inside my own head that I have written out on
Oh
computer,
gosh.
and it wasn't
Mhm.
like I had a phoenix. She's calling a phoenix god, and there was like certain magical, and there was like druids over here in mine, and
Mhm.
they were using it here, and then like I also
Mhm.
love giants and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
it's one of those things where I was trying to stay away from certain tropes.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I think when Tolkien was telling his story, he's also trying to either hit on certain tropes or stay away from certain tropes
Yeah.
that exists inside mythology. Try to
Mhm.
change it up a bit, and I think
Yeah.
he successfully did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean we got a Balrog, and that's like
Oh yeah. Yeah,
that's
which
I
is
love
really cool.
Balrogs.
Yeah,
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 like
Balrogs are
I
really cool.
now in Silmarillion when they did the Balrogs, it was
Mhm.
like so
Yep.
cool.
Yep.
And then it's like there's only one in all of Lord of the Rings. Could you
Yep.
imagine if there was an army of
Oh
them?
gosh, yeah. And I don't know how inspired he is by Eastern mythos or anything, but one thing that I really enjoy is just a lot of I just like a lot of different mythologies and a lot of different folklore. And and Balrogs remind me a lot of a specific category of djinn called Ifrits. And if you've ever played any of the Final Fantasy games, there is a summon called Ifrit that is inspired by that.
Okay.
But they're basically like these huge demonic djinn that are like Balrogs. I don't know. They're made of
Yeah,
fire and everything, and I don't know.
that's
I
actually really
wonder,
cool.
yeah, I wonder how much inspiration he got from that because they're meant to be sort of made of heat and energy and so yeah.
I
I
think
don't
that could have very well been where it
know.
came from,
Mhm.
because he is very educated in a lot of mythos from around the
Mhm.
world. But
Yeah.
his masters, like what he specialized in, was
Mhm.
European.
Yeah.
I cannot foresee that man not
Mhm.
looking into
Yeah. Yeah.
everything around the world, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
look at how much we're interested in it in just like a passing manner.
Mhm.
Now, this is his entire job. This is what he is
Mhm.
passionate about, what he does, what he writes. It's very clear that,
Mhm.
he would have picked up on some form of it.
Yeah.
Um, so, what did you think about the whole Arkenstone business?
I thought that it was very interesting. I to see, I guess, Thorin's reaction to Bilbo taking it. I didn't expect him to be so intensely like, you betrayed me, I hate you forever. Like
Yeah,
I want to
I,
kill you
but
right now, get out of my sight. Like
okay, but so since you read the Cimmerland,
hmm
uh, did you read a little bit about Sauron creating all the rings and stuff?
yes.
So
Yes.
so then you know about the part where they create the dwarven rings. The only real effect it has on the dwarves
Mm-hmm.
is it makes them greedy.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe Thorin's father
Mm-hmm.
was one of the ring bearers, or maybe his grandfather.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was one of his ancestors.
So it's very possible that that magic was like handed down with that sickness. And because they
Oh.
even talk about the gold hoard having a sickness
Mm-hmm.
over it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I feel like that could have even been residual gold
Mm-hmm.
sickness of like, you took something from me,
Yeah.
how dare you? And like, it didn't hit him until he's around his hoard of gold, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he seemed to have a head on his shoulders
Yeah.
for somewhat of the story, and then all of
Yeah.
a sudden,
He had no problem,
we
like,
get around the
yeah.
gold and his personality just
Yeah.
like instantly changes.
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely an aspect to the sickness of being
Mm-hmm.
greedy that he has
Yeah.
that made him turn ugly like that.
Yeah. And
I'm
I
not
guess,
saying it
yeah,
excuses him or anything. I'm just
yeah.
saying that
Well,
it's
it would have to, well, yeah, because it would have to be something more than just regular greed to have that intense reaction, in my opinion. Like it would have to have a magical influence. Um, because otherwise, like this person who literally had no stake in this whatsoever has traveled across, miles and miles, risked his life several times, saved your life several times, and suddenly you're gonna like turn on him because he took a rock from you. Like,
right,
I
but
don't know.
this is not just a rock for him, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
the Arkenstone. This is
Yes.
the covenant of him being king.
Yes.
This is what makes the elves bow down to him,
Mm-hmm.
and that to him is more important
Than someone who has
than his
saved his life
friendship.
several
He
times.
wants right. He wants the elves on
Mm-hmm.
bended knee in front of him, especially after
Mm-hmm.
imprisoning him. So
Mm-hmm.
he's got a grudge to hold, and he's
And
got this
that's fair. I
sickness.
don't like the elves very much either.
Now, the elves are some of the most racist,
Mm-hmm.
bad, good people in the entire story.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
if it wasn't for the fact that they fight on the side of good, I would
Mm-hmm.
consider them bad people.
Oh yeah,
They're
absolutely. I
usually
think, yeah.
jerks.
Oh yeah, they are.
They're terrible people. Um, most times, most
Mm-hmm.
times they have their moments.
Mm-hmm.
But especially the Mirkwood elves, they're very,
Mm-hmm.
very rude. They don't like people
Yes.
outside their
Yes.
own walls. Um, but yeah, so we get the gold. Now we're gonna go back to Lake Town with
Mm-hmm.
Smog flying in
Yeah. Oh
and
goodness.
bringing fire and death. What did you
Mm-hmm.
think of this with the thrush coming and telling Bard there's
I,
a scale missing?
yeah, it was definitely one of those like, I don't know if I have the right word for it. Those moments of like almost entire hopelessness, but with that tiny hope. Like you're like, okay, I know this is gonna be awful. This is gonna like be devastating. Like your
And
entire world is gonna fall apart, but
it
not
happened so fast.
100%.
Yeah, it
Mm.
happened so fast too.
Oh yeah. Well,
It,
which is I feel like very understandable in this. I mean, a dragon
yeah,
sweeping over a town made of wood.
yeah, and like I was
Oh.
so sad for them because they literally lost
Hmm.
everything.
Oh yeah.
However, the empty, vacant town of Dale was just right there, right for the taking
Yep.
anyway.
Yeah.
So, it's hard to feel bad for them losing everything when they just pick up and move to this empty town
That's
right here.
that's fair.
But
On the
like,
one, yeah.
I totally understand. Like, I
Yeah.
feel bad for them losing their livelihood and
Yeah.
everything, but they're picking up
At least
and
they have shelter.
Yeah, they still
Yeah.
have, and it's not like Dale's even a bad place. Dale is
Yeah.
actually like a fantastic city.
Yeah, yeah, they have shelter. I mean, it's awful because, any items that are sentimental that they weren't able to grab before they
That's
go and
true,
things like
most
that.
certainly.
Like,
And those who were lost that died,
mhm.
like that's very
Yeah.
sad.
Mhm.
But I just find that they're picking up, and they're just,
Yeah.
at least story wise, it doesn't feel like much more is
Yeah,
happening
that's very
than
true.
them picking up and just moving.
That's very
Yeah,
true.
and
There
now
there
we're
aren't a whole lot of pages dedicated to talking about the personal effects lost.
right. So like we don't get to feel that much. Like
Mhm.
I understand it when I read it. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
that sucks. Like it
Yeah.
sucks for anyone to have their house burned down and all their
Mhm.
stuff gone. Look
Yeah.
at the stuff around me. If I lost all
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
I would
I
be
know.
very, very sad.
I know. I'm sitting
Um,
here looking at your bookshelves and I'm like, yeah, all those would burn so fast.
so fast. This is where the fire would probably start, if anywhere, because
I
it's the
know.
most flammable room in the house.
Exactly.
But
Uh,
I hope that never happens. But I mean, like,
yeah.
it's one of those things that, like, yeah, that it's very sad. But like,
Mm,
when once my house burns down, now I have to go and find a place to live, and I don't know where
mhm.
that's going to be.
Yeah.
Um, their place burned down. They just have a vacant city
Yeah.
that they're just like,
They can
hey,
just move to, yeah,
spread out.
which is very fortunate. Yeah.
Yeah, and that works very well, and it's very interesting to see how it goes. And I
Mhm.
really love them moving into Dale
Mhm.
because it kind of shows the signs of rebirth of the area.
Mhm.
Because the dwarves are back in Erebor, the
Yep.
humans are now back in Dale.
Mhm.
They now have a king again, King
Yes.
Bard. You got
Yes.
King Thorn, and then
Mhm.
of course King Theandril comes down from Mirkwood, and we
Mm.
have the three armies getting together and having a
Yep.
conversation. And pretty soon we got the goblins coming,
Yep. Yep.
and the eagles, and we have the Battle of the Five Armies
Five
that takes
armies. Yep.
place in the snap of a finger.
Yep, yep, yep. Like, I remember I went back and forth between audio and book for this, and I remember I was listening to audio for that, and it was over, and I was like, wait, and I like went back to
Yeah,
listen to
it's
it
like,
because I was like,
wait
wait,
a second.
did I
Yeah,
did I just
Bilbo gets
what did I miss? And like I
nothing.
went back and I listened to it and read it at the same time, and I was like, oh no, I didn't miss anything.
Bilbo just gets knocked out, and that's
Yeah,
it. That's it. And then you get to
that's
see
fine.
Thorn in a tent dying, and you
I
hear
mean,
that Billy and Killy died.
mhm. I mean, it's a good way to take care of a gruesome battle in a kid's book.
Most certainly.
Yeah,
But still, once again, for a kids' book, now we're dealing with death
yeah.
because now we have Bilbo being at the bedside of Thorn with his
Mhm.
passing, and we also learned that Thorn's heirs, Billy and Killy,
Mhm.
also died during the battle as well.
Mhm.
Um, Now, this is something that I am so happy Peter Jackson did was he gave us a battle scene.
Mhm.
That was wonderful.
It
I
was.
liked the Battle of the Five Armies. That was for like the battle parts of it. That was great.
Mhm.
And we get to see all the damage that is done and
Mhm.
how much of it was really like going on because like you never even think about Dale being
Mhm.
attacked and all those refugees that just set up. Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't think about that, and the movie did such a great job at being like, oh, right.
Yeah. Yeah, they literally just got there and are just trying to set up. There's no way they got their
Yeah.
defenses up and everything.
Oh, and they're like
Uh,
carrying pointed sticks and stuff. They're not even well
mhm.
armed,
No.
So, but the dwarves seem to be well armed. And
Mhm.
does Dane from the Iron Hills end up showing up
Yeah.
just
Um,
before everything else? Yeah, he does.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And like, so like, this is the first time that we get to see like an army of dwarves,
Mhm.
and it's so cool.
Mhm.
um, I just love dwarves. I think they're a fantastic
Oh
race
yeah.
because
Absolutely.
they're like uncorrupted but super corrupted, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah.
Like magic doesn't affect them, but they're greedy as hell.
Mhm. Yep.
And it's so interesting to see. Like, I wonder if Gimli would have been able to carry the ring. and it
That's a
not
good
affect
question.
them.
Yeah.
I wonder if that would have worked out. I know the elves can't because they're
Hmm.
actually too powerful, and they would probably be able to somehow use the magic of the ring.
Hmm.
And humans would just be corrupted the way
Yeah.
hobbits are. But hobbits take a long time to
Yeah.
corrupt.
Humans would be faster.
Yes, much faster.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So with all that, then Bilbo, gets a coat of mail. The war is over, um, and he gets some treasure.
Hmm.
What did you think of this quick wrap up of everyone sharing the treasure and everything kind of going
I
on?
I feel like it was very much the conclusion to a children's book.
Yeah.
Like, like, and then they all learned their lesson and they split the treasure evenly and that sort of
And
thing.
they all shared the gold.
Yeah, that kind of thing. But also, I don't think I would have enjoyed sitting there reading about them bickering for
No,
months to
no.
years about how to split up the gold. So I'm fine with that. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
is it
Um,
realistic? No. Is it enjoyable to read? Yes.
well,
So thumbs up.
with the way Tolkien writes, I wouldn't have been
Mhm.
surprised if he mentioned it in passing, but he never
Mhm.
really does. It's kind of
Yeah.
like it's done and over with. We're done in the north. Now we're
Mhm.
going back to
Yeah.
Hobbiton.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we've covered everything in The Hobbit. Overall, what did you rate The Hobbit? Like I always rate it a
Um.
5 star because like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings to me
Mhm.
is my top. It's my top end. That's my favorite story of all. It's what
Mhm.
and you know what? If I read it today and never read it before, I don't know if I'd be able to say it's my favorite story because I can totally see the holes in it,
Mhm.
but at the same time it holds that sentimental
Yep.
value to me,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
so there is that. So what do you think of it overall as a
I
Hobbit?
think that on like a 5-star scale, I would rate it 4.5. I think I rounded it up to a 5-star on Goodreads for my Goodreads rating. The point 0.5 is because there are 13 dwarves and we don't need 13 dwarves here. Like
Give it
that,
7.
yeah, but I think I rounded it up for the sake of nostalgia read. I think so, at least. I might have given it a 4 out of 5. I don't know. But it would definitely be a 4.5 if we could do that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so yeah, I really enjoy it. It's still one of my favorite books. I have a nephew who's just turned 6 and I cannot wait until I can give him his own copy of this.
You should actually buy the audiobook of Andy Serkis reading The
Okay.
Hobbit. Did you watch
Okay.
it when he was doing that?
I didn't.
That's how I did my read for The Hobbit this year.
Okay.
I sat down and did the 8 to 10 hours of him
Oh
reading
wow.
me The Hobbit. It was
Okay.
amazing. It was
Okay.
amazing. He does the voices and everything. He's
Oh
just
wow.
so good, so good.
That's so cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
my library actually had a free like radio drama of it uh
Oh,
from
that'd
back
be
in the
so cool.
day. So that's what I'd
Yeah,
listen to. Yeah.
that's
Uh,
awesome.
but yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. So.
It's such a good book and just so it's such an easy read and
Mhm.
it's definitely one I'm going to be reading all of it to my children once
Mhm.
Asha's old enough to start grasping stuff. So I'm
Yeah.
going to read it to both of them at nighttime before they go to bed, like do a chapter a night or something.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's going to be fun to do, especially with the Hobbit, because I think we
Yep.
have a cat and his name is Bilbo. Uh,
Yep.
because I used to also have a cat named Frodo,
Oh.
like when I
Yep.
was younger as a kid. So like
Mhm.
I wanted a Bilbo, and we named him
Mhm.
Bilbo because that's my favorite Hobbit.
Yep.
So
Mhm.
um, my daughters have seen The Lord of the Rings a couple times. They've seen the
Mhm.
Hobbit movies a couple times.
Mhm.
We've watched the cartoons a few times, and
Mhm.
they love it. So like I'm creating Tolkien nerds, and they're gonna have this
Mhm.
sentimental attachment to it, like I
Yep.
do. And I think
Yep.
that's an important part of it, because if
Oh
you
yeah.
don't have that sentimental attachment to it,
Mhm.
Tolkien's writing could probably be very jarring in a sense.
Yeah, it can.
Um, he's got a very unique writing style because
Mhm.
he is a historian. He's not a writer.
Mhm.
So his writing goes from being not enough information to,
Mhm.
okay, you can stop now.
Yes, like yeah, yeah, that is very true. That's very true. It's things that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily care about. I am very I guess I'm a little fortunate in that I am very I do enjoy learning about the lore of worlds. That's why, like I said, I needed the Silmarillion before I could really enjoy Lord of the Rings because
Really, it's so good, but
I
it's so
I
tough.
needed that extra research, so to speak, before I could
You wanted to
appreciate
know
all
what they
these
were talking about
references.
when they were, yeah.
Yes, because there are just so many references that are made, and
Lots.
yeah,
Even the songs, all the songs that are in
yeah,
Lord of the Rings are
yeah,
stories that's in the Silmarillion.
exactly. And I
Beren and
just
Luthien and all
needed
that
to
sort of
know.
stuff, right?
Yes, exactly. I just needed to know. And so for me, um, like his oversharing, so to speak, is exactly what I love. So I'm
Yes.
very fortunate with that. So even though I don't necessarily have as sentimental of, I guess, nostalgic of a reason, my boyfriend loves it. He and his grandfather used to read it together.
Oh,
So
nice.
it's a very similar sentimental thing. And now
Yeah.
that I think about it, most people that I know who love it do have a little bit of a that sort of.
Yeah. It's one of those things that you do know, at least when the Lord of the Rings was made as a movie,
Mhm.
just before it was made, it was the second most sold book in the world,
Oh wow.
just under the Bible.
Yep. Yep.
And like that's how many people had picked this book
Mhm.
up and read it before it was ever a movie,
Yeah. Yeah.
before it was even a movie,
Yep.
right? Like
That's amazing.
I believe he wrote it from like the 1930s and got it published in the 50s.
Mhm.
And then when he died in the 70s, it kind of had a reinsurgence of interest. So that's why like
Mhm.
our parents have it
Yeah.
and love
Mhm.
it was from the 70s with the resurgence. And that's
Mhm.
why our grandparents love it, because they probably read it when it
Yeah.
was brand new and came out.
Yeah.
And you got to think like it's also probably one of the
Mhm.
first
Yeah.
modern fantasy books.
Mhm.
Every fantasy book takes, borrows, steals, whatever. They can do whatever they
Mhm.
want. That's fine. From Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, the one I find the closest is actually with The Witcher. I find
Okay.
it to be just. I find The Witcher to be basically an adult Lord of
Mhm.
the Rings
Okay.
in a sense. It's
And
not in the meaning that it's the same
mhm.
story, but the world is very much the same. Every time you come across
Mhm.
hobbits,
Mhm.
Tolkien created Hobbit.
Mhm.
Elves he did not create, but his style of elves he
Oh
created.
yeah.
So when
Yeah.
you get that humanoid elf, that's a
Mhm.
Tolkien creation. Because
Mhm.
before that, elves were little tiny,
Mhm.
woodland folk that were out in the woods. Like
Mhm.
fairies. They called them
Yep.
the fairy
They were either
tales back in
fairies
the
or
day.
elves. Yeah.
Right,
Yes.
right. And so then you get dwarves.
Mhm.
Now, dwarves, I think, has always been a popular thing in Norse mythology. So
Mhm.
he kind of borrowed that from there.
Mhm.
Orcs, when he created orcs, those were a brand new
Yeah,
thing.
those were
If
absolutely new. Yep.
if you find an orc in any fantasy
Mhm.
anywhere, or if you look at Wheel of Time Trollocs, they're basically
Mhm.
orcs.
Mhm.
Um, that's a creation that Tolkien created. Like
Mhm.
he created this creature that's supposed to be very animal humanistic type,
Yeah.
like a beast
Mhm.
human, basically, right?
Mhm.
And so his entire creation of all these different races of peoples
Mhm.
and stuff and histories that he's done. So I
Mhm.
mean, he's even got gods and demigods and demons,
Mhm.
and it's insane the amount of work he put into creating all
Mhm.
this history and all this story.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it's phenomenal. And even if you don't like the way he writes,
Mhm.
what he has contributed to
Mhm.
fantasy as a whole that exists today
Mhm.
is where it all comes from. Look at Game of
Absolutely.
Thrones, like
Mhm.
uh, George R. R. Martin always attributes to being inspired by Tolkien.
Mhm.
And he always says that, I'm trying to take the tropes that he created and kind of spin
Mhm.
them on their head. So everyone's trying not to copy what he does, but
Mhm. But they're still
everyone,
influenced
they're
directly
all
by him.
still taking
Mhm.
something. And that is how
Mhm.
strong it all,
Mhm.
that's how strong the story is.
Yep.
Anyway, I think that's a good place to leave this video here
Okay,
for
yeah.
The Hobbit, and
Mhm.
we will return for The Lord of the Rings.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
All right.
And you can, we'll just say bye right now. Thank you very much, KFox, for coming on.
Absolutely.
And we hope you guys all come back and visit the corner sometime. And definitely go check out KFox's channel. Her link is going to be down below and at the beginning of this video. If you missed it, I will have it up in the tags as well. Thank you very much. Bye. So you can hit the stop
Okay. I will
thing
hit the
there.
stop.